And here we go. Once again, live on the Scroll of Thoth with my good friend Frater Zentriel, is known as Jason Goff. How's it going, man?
It's going good, brother. Going good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm getting by. What can I say? Um,
Excellent.
so, so tonight, I wanted to start out with doing some questions that we didn't get a chance to answer last time. And the first question that I've got is kind of a nuts and bolts question, and it's referring to speaking with your ancestors and that type of thing. The question is, how can you tell if it's your ancestor that you're talking to and not a creeper?
Uh, okay, right.
So my first
Well, I mean,
react.
I get
Go
sure.
ahead.
Well, I see what you say.
My first reaction on this is working with ancestor spirits is probably one of the safest magics out there because your ancestors are naturally attracted to you. You're naturally attuned to your ancestors, so you're gonna have a better idea of who you're actually talking to because you knew this person in life. That all being said, this shit does happen where you get malignant spirits hanging around. And I would say, the first thing is your line of self defense. If you start out with banishing, if you start out with tossing around some Florida water, or whatever you do to quote unquote cleanse your space and get rid of any lingering spirits, and then call in your ancestors, that's the most likely way of making sure those are the spirits that you're talking to. And they should know to answer to some questions. They should feel like the people that you knew, even though they've changed, now that they've crossed over the other side. They should still remember you and you remember them, or at least have some kind of connection.
Sure, sure. Um, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think the way that you're obviously, I mean, you're talking about it from a purely, spirit type thing, which is one way of approaching it. But I don't, I mean, necessarily, I mean, not necessarily, this is also aspect of our, my kind of theory with ancestors is because they guide consciousness, our memories and stuff, that's how we're affected by these people who have crossed over. So as far as to the question, I think, what you said is really good. Basic vanishing stuff, like, I think that's really good. That kind of keeps it from, just traditionally, other, malevolent or spirit world type entities that might kind of be around. The way of with it. As far as like the actual practice, like for me, ancestor stuff, you have an ancestor altar. You've got kind of, you've got different items that typically relate to those people. So I think that's kind of like, it almost kind of sets it up for that. And how we work with ancestors, I think, can be a very fluid thing. Like, I mean, we always need to be so much like a sit down, pull this, this ancestral spirit up and have a full on conversation. It can be more nuanced than that. Like, today I've spent most of my day getting ready for a yard sale. We're doing a large like garage sale here in the family, and
Goddamn synchronicities. I'm doing the same fucking thing
right
this weekend.
there you go, man, crazy. So and that was always a really big thing with my great grandmother and my grandmother, and the place that I was moving most of this stuff out of, that's the storage area, is a building that my grandfather had bought. It's a building that we used to, we started our business in. It's a place that I grew up in. I also have memories of like me and him kind of going through this storage, and like my family was out of town and my grandfather was in town, and we got like a rollaway dumpster and just threw away all this stuff. It was like glorious day. So as I was going through all this stuff, I'm like, I was like, oh, should I keep this? Shouldn't I? It's like you kind of get this in the, some of these items, my grandmother, and it's like, well, she like, what would she say here? Would she be like, oh, keep this, this is a nice thing, or would she be like, no, get rid of that, that's kind of like, and you have like kind of, it's not like stop and do an invocation and ask my ancestors, but you kind of have these like almost like the voice in your head of like what my grandmother would say or what my grandfather would say, oh, just get rid of it, and like, are those legitimately like, am I hearing the voice from beyond the grave of my ancestors that are telling me this, or am I just, is my consciousness creating these signals based on my memories and echoes of them when they were with us? And I think it's, it's a bit of both. It's the way that emergent magic is, and the way that we're talking about it isn't necessarily this classical, like that spirit is there and they're talking to it. It's more nuanced than that. It can be, your consciousness, projecting your ideas and memories and interactions with those, that on the the screen of your mind. And as far as like, well, are these voices in my head maybe some demon that's trying to get me to do something, like, I don't know if it's necessarily, I mean, I understand the question, it's an interesting question, but I think the way that we're talking about work ancestors is not really so much, should be a lot of fear of that happening, I guess. I would be more, I think it's better that, it's always approach magic with, a degree of caution, do your banishings, do your homework and stuff. But, more so than that, I think it's more important that you, still try and do this stuff, rather than being like, oh, I'm scared to like, set up this altar and try and like, call on my ancestors because I'm afraid that like some other malevolent demon is going to just pop in there and I won't know if it's really them or really not. And I think it's kind of like a bit more of an older school model of magic, where you figure out what the entity is by asking them specific things. But I think what you said is pretty much right. You have a feeling, if you're specific an ancestor, and you're doing a divination, asking, you should have a general feeling of, of that person kind of, and however you're choosing to communicate, whether it's, just intuition, you kind of hear the ideas, or if you're using a divination method like, tarot or dowsing or any other type of, communication device, you can kind of do it. But yeah, I think that's kind of how I'd answer that.
and me coming from the other side, who does believe in a reality of spirits, I would say your fear is going to end up attracting those malignant entities. It's your fear that they're going to feed on. So, approach this with, this is going to be a positive experience. Don't worry about that shit. The more you worry about it, the more of a problem it's going to be.
Yeah, and approach it with some type of reverence. There's some rituals that are great for in the middle of a party, or as the night has been going on. Maybe your heavier ancestor work isn't for that time.
Yep.
Put it in an appropriate context. And I want to. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that I disbelieve in the idea of actual spirits themselves, but just from an EMK standpoint, this is certainly a discussion that can be had, whether or not we're talking about a psychological model or a spirit model or some kind of quantum information model. You don't have to hold on to any of these one things. I mean, if you just to be like, I don't believe in the spirit, well, that doesn't mean you can't work with ancestors. I mean, you still believe that you have memories, right? I mean, that you met these people and that you have some kind of construct in your consciousness of what they might want for you, now that they're gone. And I mean, that's enough right there. You don't have to, depending on your personal paradigm, this is something that's valid for magicians to work with, regardless of whether or not they believe in the spirit. I just want to kind of clarify that. I'm not saying we're not locked in that mold. Like, ancestor work is not just for people that work spirit model. That's
I
not
agree.
True. Yeah,
I
it can be.
agree.
You can be a completely atheistic practitioner with no concrete but actual belief in spirits outside of your own perspective, still plenty from doing ancestor work, and should certainly do it. I mean, this goes back to what makes EMK, what is emergent magic, how is it different than chaos magic and Thelema and Wicca. This isn't that we the ancestors, so it is an important kind of keystone part, but it can be worked from any kind of viewpoint, any kind of worldview.
All right, let's get to the second question here.
Yep.
What should an individual or community do to address the balance of using drugs for magic and people who overindulge or could be impaired by those said drugs?
Yeah. Well, we've touched on this a little bit. It's definitely in the magical community, and not just one, but in a lot of the magical communities, you will run into kind of, people who overindulge. And I mean, that's, whether it's a festival or whether it's, a sabbat, this does happen. And, what happens when the drugs are taking precedent over the magic really is, I think, the key problem there. And, on this.
Yeah, it's about communication. It
Mm-hmm.
really is about communication, and it's about trust.
Mm-hmm.
Do you trust that the members of your tribe have your best interests at heart? So, right. If someone approaches you and says, hey, maybe you should take it back a notch, well, you should take that
Mm-hmm.
seriously. That person, right. If you trust in your tribe, that person's looking out for you. And I think people in general, when they say that, it's not attack. You can't take that personally. It's not an attack on your character. It's not an attack on who you are. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
And just borrowing from basic psychology therapy, don't say, why you always drunk at these things. It's like,
right, yeah,
this is what I saw last time we were together,
mm-hmm.
or this is what I'm seeing right now. Although it's harder to reason with someone who's, intoxicated.
Right.
And talk to them directly. You don't want to have a lot of talking behind someone's back. You need to get together as a group and you need to work these things out. And you're going to fail as a group. I know we have,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we haven't handled things right, and we always try to do
Mm-hmm.
better. We're not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But keeping that communication open. And that's really, that's the heart of neo-tribalism is that it's consensus. It's ruled by consensus. So, you can't look to a leader. You can't look to, someone who is grade 0 alpha to come and sort shit
Right.
out.
One person, one person, if you've got a group, one person doesn't decide like, oh, I don't like how this person has been acting. They've been getting too wasted, blah, blah. And then that person is gone. It shouldn't be like that. There should be an authoritarian kind of, these aren't really black and white issues. I mean, the problems that arise are, is somebody regularly too intoxicated to be a benefit to the group magically? Is somebody incapable of listening to the descriptions of the rituals and performing them? Or is, it taken to another level, is somebody to the point that they mess up the ritual while it's going on? An interesting anecdote that I thought of last time when we brought this up was there was a character who was a member of a working group of magicians. Wasn't there this, but this person evidently had been kind of, had joined the group and, was showing up a little bit more inebriated as the kind of meetings went on over, months and, whatever the time was. And kind of at one point showed up, and this was a I believe the story was it was a Baphomet invocation. And starting to invoke, and everybody was supposed to be doing this, doing this ritual together, and like they just started randomly screaming bear, bear, and stumbling around the room and like pounding on the walls like incoherently, and like there was no bear in the ritual. There was not a part of it, like, and it wasn't like it was just like it was just like this crazy drunken weird thing. And I remember my friend saying, yeah, so we're like standing there looking at each other, it's the middle of the ritual, and this guy's like crawled into a corner shouting bear. I was like, what did you do? And he's like, well, we just stopped ritual. And then kind of, what the hell do you do? And I think if I remember correctly, they stopped coming on their own. I don't, remember any specifics of that, being like, well, now that was it, but this is the kind of just silly nonsense that can happen when people aren't taking it seriously anymore, or maybe they did not take anything, or maybe they just are thinking, well, or whatever, it's just a party now, or people have personal problems in their own life. I mean, people, and this is the thing, people might just be getting totally fucked up all the time, and now it's just falling over well. And I mean, we've seen the results of letting people take it too far on a regular basis, and watching just not and we've lost people to that kind of behavior. I mean, I hope we can do better in the future, I guess. But what you're saying about communication, I think, is definitely the cornerstone of it. These aren't issues. Every situation is different. Somebody getting intoxicated and causing harm to other, aggro, do they get aggressive when they're in a drunken state, or does somebody just pass out? I mean, I've been at a magical meeting where somebody at 11 a.m. and was passed out at 2. Ritual started at 3, did rituals till midnight, and I think he stumbled into the 11 o'clock or midnight ritual. And this is a big meeting that we traveled out of state for. So people, this is, I mean, a dedicated magician. So even people that, are dedicated and do usually take it seriously, still can have, and that's one example where, okay, well, you pass out on the couch all day, but that doesn't really harm anybody. It's a different thing where, if somebody is intoxicated, getting in a car, and going while they're wasted, or, doing something that's going to cause harm, it's another level up. And, you go beyond that, is somebody getting drunk and throwing, because they get aggressive when they're drunk, and now there's fights at meetings, and there's all different rules, and it just needs to be self-policed. I don't think it's not right ever to have, a small group of people like, the PRs, us in the Order of Emergent Magi. We can't say this is the behavior that's acceptable and this is the behavior that's not. That's for each tribe to decide. That's for each, individual autonomous Boehm group, whether they choose that moniker or whether or not they want to come up with, the dancing gods or goddesses of the triangle emergent magic, or whatever you want to call your tribe. That's all fine. But that's going to be up to the flying triangle goddess people to decide what's okay for their meeting. And it's, us as, like, I guess I like the term book house magic tribe, kind of we're kind of from some of the first EMK guys out there. We've got our small tribe, and we've got to self-police that and try and do our best, there. So
yeah, it's nuanced, like you said, and like that the instance where you have someone who's coming regularly getting too fucked up, maybe not everyone sitting around in a circle and doing a fucking intervention. That might not be the way to go. You might have to select 2 or 3 people to talk to this person. It probably shouldn't be one-on-one. You should have other people who say, yeah, I saw those too. So it's nuanced. That story that you were saying about, the bear guy, number one is a good thing to always remember that fuck-ups will usually remove themselves. You just have to be watchful to make sure that they're not hurting anyone else before it gets to that point. So, if they're just a general fuck-up and not hurting anyone, the chances are they're just going to leave by themselves. Now, you know, as far as this guy shouting bear in the middle of this ritual, okay, well, you know, you're a shitty magician, because even if you were suddenly, you know, struck by a spirit, and you saw a bear or something related to a bear, it happened in the middle of this ritual where you were supposed to be focused on this, and you're letting this other thing get to you. Yeah, you need to start working on your yoga, bitch.
Yeah.
Go back to step one.
Right. Yes. I would. Yeah, I would agree there. And And another thing is too. I mean, the mental capacity of people who practice magic can deteriorate. That is a fact, and I've seen it. Magic is.
Yeah.
It can be. It can be good, and it can sometimes be bad. You are allowing it to just be an excuse to act in any kind of way, then magic can really, can be not good for you. And some people, people's mental state can deteriorate, and people can be, good and dedicated for a few years, and things can happen in people's lives. There are mental illnesses that are people that if they don't follow a medication program, for instance, and get off of it. I've seen people get fall off of that wagon or not follow up with proper self-care. Of using drug, alcohol is just one thing, but other behaviors as well. And you can't hold this person was so great 5-6 years ago, we did all this stuff, if the last 2 years have just been worse and worse and worse and worse. And like, you don't want to allow somebody to keep if they're drastically doing worse. I think a big thing with emergent magic is it's magic in forming magic. It's supposed to be a progression. Things that are bad happen to all of us. We all go through tough times, but in general, you should be your life should be getting better. You should be getting more disciplined, and as you grow older, your magic should be tighter and stronger. And if it's several years of unraveling with a person, then maybe it's time for them not to be part of your inner tribe anymore. And that's just the reality of magic. You've got to sometimes people you got to tell them no. Sometimes people can't be invited to the party. It'd be great for everybody to be able to do this kind of stuff and to practice magic and do serious rituals, but we all can't, so.
Well, if our work with the Gutter Bible has shown us anything, there's a fine line between magic and insanity. And, and I'm not talking about the grand Cthulhu insanity, that type of thing. People get caught up in depression and get caught up in, bipolar behaviors and risk-taking behaviors because, dealing with these entities or dealing with these ideas do bring a lot of emotional stress. Ritual brings a lot of emotional stress.
Right.
And some people do not deal with it well.
Israel Regardie believed that everybody that everybody that was going to practice magic should first go through a full psychoanalysis professionally.
Right.
Now, I don't necessarily agree with that per se, but he's on to something. He's certainly on to something, and something to be said there. If you have severe psychological problems and you're not addressing those, magic is not going to be able to help you get out of that. Magic can be a tool that if you're following self-care, if you have by dealing with mental health, you can work through that. You can be on medication, you can follow your medication, you can do self-help. A lot of the meditation and breathing and stuff is stuff that we're talking about anyway. So I mean, magic is definitely accessible for everybody. It's just you've got to do it on both sides. You can't be like, okay, well now ritual, so now I don't need my Prozac anymore, and I don't need to go see my psychiatrist, and the hell with it, I'll start smoking weed again, even though and then well, maybe I'll drink too. And I mean, there's there's a slippery slope there, and all of us deal with depression and in some of us more than others. I mean, everybody has days, but for magical use, I think it's really important. You need to take care of yourself psychologically before you kind of dive into all this stuff, because it is dangerous, and it is emotionally taxing, and it is people that aren't doing this, that haven't done real magic or haven't done a lot of group magic, especially people that have just done magic alone. Stand talking about you're just dancing around in robes, or you're doing these silly things, or saying these words. I mean, how can that affect you? You just don't know what you're talking about, because if you do these practices, then you realize that like magic is very real. Is it real in a way that I can levitate something with my mind, or turn myself into a crow? No, of course not. But it's very real in a way that can alter your perceptions and make you feel very drastically different about yourself and about the other people in your life.
Oh yeah.
So it's real, and just be careful, the kids.
Yep. So last question for right now, unless someone out there in the chat room wants to ask some more. And this is a question I would like to devote an entire episode to at one time, but maybe we could just go through a couple. I had a question of what books would you recommend to someone who wants to get into emergent magic?
That's a tough one. I've been thinking about this quite a bit. Because our book on emergent magic, which we are writing, would be
obviously the book Emergent Magic. Yeah, but you got that. Yeah,
it's not so there yet. And go ahead.
Well, I think that we devoted a whole episode to biocentrism, and that would probably be one of the first picks. Biocentrism.
Yes, read that, absolutely.
By and now the
Robert
name,
Lanza.
Robert Lanza.
Yeah.
For just a good view of it's a magical view of the universe, even though it doesn't talk about magic at all. It's not a book about magic. But it's a book about how consciousness creates the universe.
Right, which is one of our kind of key things. This is what's interesting about emergent magic. It's being said, I think, not in other magic books. There's not other occult books that are talking about emergent magic.
There's a few. Well, okay. I'll get to that.
There are emergent principles, I'm sure, in some. But specifically, I think like biocentrism is and Beyond Biocentrism, there are two books, are an excellent example of the scientific community talking about the stuff that we're talking about. And the other branch that you're going to see a lot of this type of writing and the same things that we're talking about is the psychedelic research that's coming out. A lot of the authors on psychedelics are saying the same things that we're saying. Yeah. I read a great listened to a great clip of a podcast by one of the current one of the guys that, and if you just Google the top 10 psychedelic books, it's going to pop up with most authors. One of those authors is a list out there, and he was talking about, this is something that Dr. Hoffman talks about in his book LSD the Problem, and something we talk about a lot. He says, meditation for some people, might not lead anywhere. You can't tell people to meditate and guarantee it's a spiritual thing. Some people might get bored. Some people might get a little bit of something, maybe not. Some people might just get a really sore back and get frustrated and not want to do it again. Now, if you dose somebody with LSD, you're going to get a certain reaction. Now, exactly what reaction you get depends on several factors. Depends on the environment, the viewpoint of the person going into the trip, how they've prepared for it, where they're at in their life at that time. But if you give somebody 100 milligrams of LSD, that they are going to have a transcendental experience. Now, some of those can be bad and scary. That's very true. But even those, most people, and you can read this in the research by everybody that's doing the research now, most people that have those negative trips afterwards, when they're out of that, they still take a positive learning from that. A lot of these still result in a positive change, and most trips aren't bad. Most are good, and people, you know, get to have insights into their own lives that they with classical meditation, the old school ways of the swamis and this yoga stuff. It's accessible to people that can work that system. But with psychedelics, you've got access to that for everybody. And
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of different spectrum of it, but you know, I certainly think that a lot of the stuff that is emergent, that when we're talking about emergent magic and EMK and consciousness and stuff, you know, is really related a lot to what people are studying with the psychedelic experience. So I think that, you know, that kind of those kind of books, they're saying a lot of the same stuff that we're saying. And I find that really interesting. You know, there's a huge connection between, you know, quantum mind and, you know, discovering, you know, how the universe is created, you know, as well as psychedelia and magic. These things are all very uniquely intertwined. No, read some of the psychedelic stuff out there. Read Hoffman's book. So let's talk back about magic books specifically.
Well, okay. Well, I just want to throw out there on the psychedelic front, there's an organization called MAPS. It's a multidisciplinary association for psychedelic studies. It's a good starting point if you're looking for books and papers and things like that on psychedelics. Right. So magic books, one that I would throw out there is a book called The Chaos Protocols by Gordon White. Now, Chaos Protocols is mostly about economics, but he gets into a point about where he's really close to touching on the concept of the emergent tribe. Like in the future, you know, we cannot depend upon the government. We cannot depend upon our education. We cannot depend upon, you know, all these social systems that are put in place. So we're going to have to find new ways to get by in life. And our emergent tribe is a way to do that. I mean, it's stuff, you know, that you already do. You're in this tribe, and it's like, well, I have these skills, you have those skills. We could trade, you know, whatever. And that's how we get, you know, done way more than we would as individuals. And it kind of protects you from those outside influences, which are, you know, designed to basically crush you and suck your money. So that's why I would recommend the Chaos Protocols and some of the other stuff in there as well. Gordon's a fun guy. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, other books. I mean, there's a lot of great books on. I mean, you know, I mean, the thing with emergent magic is you've really got kind of like a way to approach magic, you know, and, you know, do that with any paradigm. So it's really personal taste. Like what we talk about with emergent magic is, okay, so if you want to do magic, well, pick a paradigm that's fun to you. Go to a magic store, pick what, you know, what are you drawn to? What book do you find that you, I mean, it can be, you know, Norse, it can be, you know, Wiccan, it can be some kind of neo-pagan thing, it can be some kind of like sci-fi thing. You know, once you pick your paradigm, you know, get a couple books on a certain type of magic, and then like find another person and be like, look, let's figure out these rituals, let's do that, and go from that point. Like, because really with emergent magic, like it's you're learning it yourself. It's what the magic is itself. Like any have is fine. You can pick any symbol system. Like even the cheesiest like neo-pagan Wiccan book, for somebody who's just starting magic the first time, the basic exercise in there, just maybe years later you might look back. I mean, I look back at some of the early books I read on magic, and they're almost, I mean, they're incredibly childish, some of them. But at the time, at 18, 19 years old, just getting in or new. So it was like this really fresh, cool thing back 20 years ago that, maybe later on doesn't hold up, but there's always parts, even in those cheesiest first books, there was mantras that I learned and memorized and would repeat. It's not so much about, any of the books, I think, any of the books on chaos magic are going to be good, because chaos magic books are basically on how to do rituals, how to take a paradigm, strip it all down, pull the guts out of it, and, make it work. So I think, a lot of the chaos is certainly good. That's kind of the last step before emergent magic. If you understand and can practice some chaos magic, then essentially emergent magic is what happens when you practice chaos magic for a decade or more. There didn't need to be and there didn't need to be a word for what happens when you practice chaos magic for a decade successfully. What does it become then? Does it morph into a different thing? Know that when you're starting it out, but 30 years later, now we can look back and we can see there's been hundreds of people that have worked the system for a decade or more, and they're all saying the same thing. They're all saying, well, no, chaos magic isn't just about getting a result, which is the original intention of it was. There's also there is this community thing, there's this spiritual aspect. It's kind of like we say a lot, like something that was on the tip of everybody's tongue, but nobody said it yet, and it just needed to be defined. So emergent magic is what you get, when you've in a practice for a long time. And as far as like where to start with reading and all that, I mean, I always suggest any of the old school stuff from the last century, Israel Regardie, Dion Fortune, Aleister Crowley, McGregor Mathers, A.E. Waite, all the kind of the big hitters, the classic guys. And some of that stuff's a little bit trudgy to get through, and some of it, is kind of dated. But I mean, it all gives you a good.
Yeah, and this kind of segues into our conversation on belief, where okay, so we understand that emergent magic is magic informing magic, that it's you're building your own belief system based on the magic that you've done and what you have learned from that magic, but you still have to have some kind of starting point. Mm-hmm. And what you're saying is, pretty much any starting point is as good as another. Now, you Absolutely. And I might argue about that. I happen to believe that context matters, and that historical magical symbols and systems matter. And mm-hmm. There's stuff to be learned from this, and these were successful magicians, and so paying attention to what they did is a good idea.
Yeah, you're right, and that's just like I said. Read the classics, read the classic stuff. Any of the Golden Dawn era stuff that was 100 years ago or so, when the last kind of big occult revival that leads into the chaos magic stuff that was the last 30 years, in the 70s up until now. But yeah, that stuff's all very important. Again, you can really choose any. I mean, you could go at it from a completely. I mean, you can do system or Buddhist system. I mean, you can pick any major religion. You can do Kabbalistic, Hebrew stuff, or I mean, you can go the other way too. It doesn't need to be a specific magic. If Taoism, you can figure out how to do. Actually, there's a book on one of the chaos magic people wrote. I used to have that was the chaos, like Taoism in chaos. Somebody had built their own little paradigm that way. So you can, I mean, you can use some of these older systems too, as well, is I guess just what I'm saying. If you want to go kind of the Eastern, there's all that stuff. There's just some stuff out there, really. I mean, some people are going to be drawn to the Cthulhu stuff, right from the start. That's just fine. I mean, but I do agree with you. I think, having a good foundation in traditional magic, traditional Western magic is really good. And also, yeah,
I think people should take their time in this, and they should explore different systems and maybe see how they mix and how they collide. You know, like Saint Cyprian, since we're recording this the day after his feast day, and our last show is about Cyprian. You know, examining his works and seeing how Christianity and paganism coexisted at one point, and kind of deconstructing that and saying, you know, well, what does this mean as a foundation for magic? And you'll probably have some false starts. You'll probably find a belief system that you think that's great, but then when you start working with it and trying to build on it, you don't go anywhere, and you might try something else.
Yeah, and again, you know, as you practice magic, as the years go on, and as you develop your own symbol system and alphabet of desire and all this, I mean, you know, you're going to discard some of the stuff that you first run across. You don't have to worry about. I mean, the thing is, just read all of it. You know, read about Santeria, read about voodoo, read about all these that are out there. You know, the more stuff that you know, the more paradigms that you understand, the better you're going to be a magician, because you never know when you're going to show up to a meeting or to a group event somewhere, and somebody's going to say, okay, well, now we're going to do some, you know, basic, we're going to work with some Santeria, we're going to do, you know, veneration of the Loa, and we're going to do, you know, we have to start with Legba to open the door and work with the shoe, and you're like, oh, I don't have any idea who Legba is. I mean, you should know that. I mean, people should know the gatekeeper in all the African religious traditions. So anyways, I mean, it's just, you know, and a lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, you know, the basic, you know, it works with the archangels. You draw the pentagrams around you. It's Golden Dawn, Aleister Crowley era ritual, you know, people should know that, you know. So if you say, okay, well, we're going to do this, you know, Enochian is another really fun, kind of crazy, archaic thing. You know, Enochian is the magical system developed by D. and Kelly in the 15th century. You know, read about that stuff, so that when somebody says, okay, now we're going to do this part of this ritual that's in that means, you know, Enochian's the language of the angels, you know, it comes from the system. I mean, and of course you're not going to learn all this overnight. It's not about having to know it all at once. You know, I mean, if there's people that are practicing magic with us for several years that probably don't know all these things that I'm talking about, right? Because I mean, they haven't had 20 years to read all these books. You know,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's huge. But
yeah, it is. There's a lot out there. You know.
Here's what I'm going to say though, and this is where we might get into points of disagreement. Is that once you find, you know, what is working for you, and once your magic is informing magic, once that click happens, and you see that, you know, your rituals and whatever things that you're doing is leading you to the next point that you need to find, that's when I think it's important to hold on to that belief system. And I would say, you know, grip it tight, to grab that thread and to truly believe. I think there's too many magicians out there, and I think chaos magic kind of foments this, who think that you can believe something for 10 minutes and then not believe it, and
get away with it.
You're still going to get the same result. Well, you're fucking not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Key failure of chaos magic. Yes.
You know, there are people in voodoo and Santeria. You know, if you went to them and asked them, do you absolutely believe in the Loa and the spirits and your ability to contact them, they would say yes. And that's not something that you change. Okay. Yeah. At the same time, and this is the part that I've had several people come up to me lately and say this is the part they love about emergent magic, is that once you enter the group, once you're doing group ritual, okay, we're not telling you to drop that entire belief system that you developed, but we are asking you to accept the belief system of the person next to you and everyone in your tribe, and understand that it's equal to yours, it's just as important of yours, and you can learn something by working within that belief system when the tribe comes together.
Right. Yeah. The idea of the complete fluidity of belief, like that it's just a tool that I can believe this one minute and not believe it the next minute, is kind of a fallacy. Like it, in a fallacy, I mean that it does not produce effective, very effective or very good magic, in my opinion. Now, other people may disagree with me, but from what I've seen, people that develop a deeper set of beliefs that are their kind of core beliefs are the ones that have more success personally. And when you can just at the drop of a dime be like, well, for me, that's when people get cast aside and kind of that's when you get a lot of problems with ego. Well, I don't like this thing that person said or did, so now now it's not good anymore. The whole idea of belief being a tool is, it's groundbreaking in the way that it doesn't hold on to like the laws of magic. Like it's not like, you learn magic and it's a certain thing. It breaks it open that it can be any of these things.
Mhm.
But just because it can be any of these things doesn't mean that one of them doesn't need to be real for you. One of them does. Like part of it needs to be real. Now, like for me, like, do I believe emergent magic is a real thing? Yes. Now, do I believe that it's a spirit world model 100%, or do I believe that it can be psychological as well, or a mix of both? Do I change my opinion depending on the conversation sometime? Am I back and forth? Yes, but that's not varying my belief. My belief is that EMK is a system that works a certain way, period. And there are morals attached, there are social responsibilities attached to it, and there are the influence of the ancestors attached to that. And those are the things that I believe. Now, my worldview of that, how that what universal model I use to work belief, be arbitrary. I can have a conversation about the ancestors being a part of our psychological conscious makeup, and also have a conversation about how they're actual spirits on the other side. And that's not like, to me, that's not splitting my belief. That's just two different ways of explaining the core belief of what EMK is. And I liked what you said there about accepting, and it is very much that. It's not so much like when you say in chaos magic, now we're going to do this, Greek god working, so now you believe in Greek gods. Like, that doesn't really happen, because like the main person who's really doing that paradigm at the time may, because they've been working with it for a while, maybe that's their thing. But like you're really not going to walk in there and then all of a sudden believe it. But it is more like what you're doing is you're being like, okay, now accept that this is a form of magic that this person is doing and act accordingly. If the ritual requires you to project a belief, or to something, or to do a certain part, or say a certain mantra, if you're supposed to say a mantra that's reverent to Ganesh in a ritual, and somebody is doing a which we've done tons of work in over the years with Ganesh, very popular entity, that's the elephant-headed entity in the Hindu tradition. Obstacles, and is kind of a gate opener. He's a wealth guy. Ganesh is kind of an all-around fun dude. People love Ganesh.
Sure.
But if you're gonna do working with him, somebody's gonna do that. Maybe maybe you don't know the Hindu paradigm very well, but the part is, maybe you're gonna give an offering, and maybe you're gonna say a mantra. Then you act accordingly. You do that with a difference. Just like laugh, like, oh, ha ha, this now that I'm giving this elephant statue this rice. You don't do that internally. You don't say that out loud. You don't say that to yourself. You approach it with a degree of, you're going to get something out of that ritual that way. If not, then you're either going to not getting something for yourself, first level, or number two, if you mess up the ritual for everybody else. It's no fun to, if everybody does a Discordian ritual and everybody wants to count out 23s and do rubber duckies and wear silly hats, and everybody laughs and that's fun. But then the next thing up is, you know, a Ganesh working that's more reverent and, you know, a serious kind of thing, might be for healing or something. And then, you know, one person is, you know, a la upside down hat ducky land, laughing and making rhymes and being sucked. You know, now that person's been unable to turn that off and go into the next level. And, you know, it works the other way too. If you're doing a real serious heavy thing and then the next ritual is a happy discordian fun thing that, you know, maybe you're trying to lighten the mood from the previous, you know, you don't want to be sitting there sulking still, and
for
you know,
the
while
entire
everybody
fucking night. And to me, that, you know, that goes back to if you can't do that, if you can't change your mindset like that, then you're probably a crappy magician, and you need to start
back to the
working.
yoga.
Back to the yoga.
Back to the yoga. That's our new. That's going to be our new. That's our new thing. Up magic. Back to the yoga. Back to your house. Sit still. Stare at one point. You've got a couple more months of that.
And no matter how good we are, I think we can all benefit from that. You know, taking it from another perspective, you know, I'm sold on the spirit model. I approach magic from the spirit model, and I see other models of magic, and I find those limiting for me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean it's not working for someone else. It doesn't mean I don't respect that person. It doesn't mean that, you know, that their magic is lesser. It just means it's different. And I definitely learned something from that, because obviously, you know, magic is not just one thing. So, you know, I have to accept parts of this always, you know, that how much of this is in my head. Right. Probably a lot of it. So, you know,
yeah, you know, for me, like, I don't even really see this. For me, the separation is less. I think that it's we're only these words with our limited ability to communicate ideas in these bodies, you know, on this level of consciousness. We only have so many dimensions on this level of consciousness. The outside, you have a higher dimensionality and more deeper ways to kind of grok these very slippery concepts that we talk about. But what's important, again, is the work. What's important is what works for you, how you want to define it for yourself. EMK can only be defined by the practitioner themselves. Nobody can tell you what emergent magic is. You have to discover it. You have to build that citadel within yourself, you know, and with your own tribe. And you know, I think that's just kind of that's kind of the most important part of it. You know, rather than any one specific belief being pushed one way or the other. It's just what's important is what works for you, and you know, too, honestly, like if something feels restrictive, like if you feel like the idea that, you know, it's just in your head, or the idea that it's, you know, any of those ideas are restricting or making it less fun for you, or making it like magic should never be a hassle. It's work, yes, but it should be enjoyable work. I mean, this is your sexuality. This is not church. This is not where you have to go and sit and listen to this boring sermon and get up and sit down and kneel uncomfortably and wear scratchy clothes. This is the opposite of that. This is saying we would smash all that down, and, you know, we can build something so much more powerful for your own spiritual self and self-discovery, and, you know, for your, you know, whatever you're seeking of God or self or oblivion is. You know, this is a way for you to do it for yourself, and there aren't no rules about how it has to be. And you should be enjoying that. Like that's the fun part of EMK, is that it breaks apart these rules, throws away like all these restrictive areas of paradigm, and allows you to your own magical system and your own belief system. And if there's a part of your belief that is restrictive to your creativity, or that feels like it's more that is making it not fun for you and something you don't want to do, then you need to move past that. Not that are hard. Like this is a a thing that I need to face within myself that's difficult for me to advance myself. Like I drink too much, therefore, not saying this me, but as example,
Okay.
I drink too much. It's messing up my relationships. Now I need to fix that. I need to recognize that. You don't just move past that. But if, you're in your paradigm and you're like, oh, working with this and working with my altar and believing that I have to do this certain thing each day at this certain time, maybe at first it was a really cool thing, maybe, but now it's become something that's like a hassle. Oh, I have to do this. Then from that practice, from that specific, the specific nuts and bolts of what you're doing, that can always be kind of changed, and it should be enjoyable. You should always be looking for it.
Yeah, that's an opportunity for emergence right there. It's like, so if I'm doing this stuff every single day and it's become a chore, what is the vital part of this? What should I really be doing at the heart of it? Why am I doing it? And what are the results that I'm getting? And you should be learning that from what you've done before.
Right,
and
right.
that's the heart of emergence.
Yeah, and again, emergent magic is the slow magic, the long invocation. We're not talking about you do the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram 3 times one night, and then you decide the next day, whoa, what was the heart of that ritual? No, like you need to be doing that twice a day, maybe 3 times a day for 6 months. Okay, then once it's memorized and it's ingrained and you're doing it in your dreams and you can astrally do it, kind of, sit there and just sit still and meditate, close your eyes and kind of visualize yourself doing it. Once you've developed that and done that, then now it's time to move on. And again, there's no easy answers here, and throwing things out right away, that's not at all what I'm saying either. But certainly, there are steps. You do progress. There are you do at the beginning of your practice that you're not going to do years later. And there's also stuff that you'll do the whole time. Lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram being one of those key things for me, at least. One of the first rituals I did, still do it. I've been more recently doing it more often now. That's a key thing that I will do forever. That's, and that's one of those timeless kind of rituals. As far as if you're this is a good one. If you're a complete novice magic and you've never done a ritual, banishing ritual of the pentagram, it is a cornerstone of magic. Learn it, memorize it, do that twice a day. That's a great way to start. If you do that and then set up an altar and move some things around your altar and write a couple sigils and just do that ritual, the lesser banishing ritual, in the morning and at night, you are a long way towards becoming a magician. I mean, that's enough. That's enough to get you through a year. You add in there just the meditation stuff and a couple mantras and some breath work and that ritual. Maybe add the middle pillar, which is another classical ritual that's out there. And all this stuff can be found online. There's videos showing you how to do it, and it is really accessible. When I learned those rituals, there wasn't YouTube, any of these things. So I wasn't at my house.
I think that's a good thing that brings this conversation around when we first started talking about books and doing your research.
Right.
Absolutely need to be doing that. But at the same time, don't wait. Don't say, oh, I got to read this next book or I got to learn this next thing. Start doing magic.
Right.
That's the only way to really learn. It's the only way to access some of these mysteries. Get off your ass and do some magic. And you just start. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid that you're going to get some negative entity, coming and getting attached to you. If that happens, well, then learn how to fucking banish it. Or find someone who can. But magic has risks inherently. So just you have to get over that. That's all there is to it. And I'd also say, kind of sum up everything that we've been talking about belief. Have your belief system, work on it, be attuned to it. But to put this in the concept of the old aeon versus the new aeon, old aeon is religion, it's race, it's nationality, it's culture, all these things where people are like, our way's better, and we're with ourselves, and anyone who's not one of us is going to hell, and they're assholes. The new Aeon, the emergent Aeon, is acceptance, is understanding that we can come together as people, and magic and ritual can be the thing that binds us together. But people can
Absolutely.
still
Yeah.
hold on to their own beliefs, still, you
Right.
know, thrive in their own cultural values and have those
Right.
accepted by those around you.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, Ogham is the order that is about acceptance and community. You know, this is not about we know the right way to do magic. This is a new system. We're going to create a secretive little group and make initiations and start our own little, in the shadows, fancy group where we go some dark corner somewhere a couple times a year and do magic. That's not what this is about. This is about these tools to all of humanity, every person, everybody. Chaos magic was good for practicing magicians to become better magicians. EMK is about people, human beings, mankind becoming better people and becoming a better species and trying to save our modern society, essentially trying to, you know, stop destroying the earth, stop killing each other, stop racist and sexist and violent behaviors, and instead do, do art and create music and poetry and be positive. This is as cheesy as it sounds, this is where this is love magic, man. This is a positive thing that anybody can have access to, and could really, religions divide people. Religions have built this world around hiding, and we're right, they're wrong, we're the chosen people, they're not. And that's not worked for human beings. It has not worked for the world, and it threatens to cause the destruction of the world, quite frankly.
Yep.
Capitalism versus socialism versus all this stuff. And EMK seeks to remedy that spiritually by creating bonds between people that are on a different level. And this is not an exclusive thing. This is not something that only experienced super occultists can do. Anybody can pick up these techniques. Anybody can set up a little shelf in their house with some ancestor stuff and get a little bit of water, Florida water, maybe burn some incense, do some candles. Any person, any human being do these things. You don't
Anybody
have to
can get together on a Friday night with their friends and come up with some rituals and work them together and
absolutely
and be a part of something.
Call yourself Temple of the Rising Sun. You can call yourself, the Moon Brotherhood or Sisterhood. You can do whatever, and nobody out there is going to tell you that we're going to tell you that nobody out there should be telling you your magic is not valid, and you're not a sanctioned temple degree this or an initiated that. Okay, because that's a bunch of garbage. All of it is trash.
Yep.
You can do all your own magic right now. Is it I don't remember the person. I think it may be Aleister Crowley, who said he's never met a person that is not completely already their own god. And that goes to the core. This is about each person individually expressing themselves in a spiritual way, in a positive way, and creating positive change in the world. Yeah, that's just do it, man. Just do it. Where Ogham is here, what Ogham is about is this open source. We're allowing people to be. It's like this is like we're doing this to try and give you permission that it's okay. Like we're not trying to Order of Emergent Magi is not about trying to conform people into what we think our idea of a good magician or a good magical group is, or what they should be working on, or how they should be doing their practice. This is about letting people know you can do this and it is valid, and you don't need all these other things. And go ahead, call yourself Emergent Magician, because you absolutely are. And if you do it long enough, get a hold of us. Maybe we hook up. Maybe one day you can be a Bookhouse PR.
There you go.
Which is a fancy way of just saying you can publish stuff with us.
All right. Well, hey, we hit our hour mark, and
Great.
it was a good time. I'm going to end the broadcast here if you want to hang out for a couple minutes. And thanks, everybody, for listening.
All right. Cheers.